You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Ross Kay from Ross Kay Realty Consultants. We'll have Ross Kay up to bat right after this.
I'm Larry Ray, President and CEO of American Manganese, Inc., listed on the TSX Venture, ticker symbol AMY, A-M-Y, with proprietary patents in the U.S., China, and South Africa. Our focus is on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. China recently legislated the responsibility for recycling onto their electric vehicle manufacturers and importers. For more information, please visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
We're speaking with Ross Kay. Ross, Vancouver and Toronto remain Canada's hottest housing markets with huge price rises, but we're not the only place in the world seeing this. Negative interest rates in Switzerland have forced people there to look at where can we put our money and make something on it. And as a result, real estate prices in Switzerland have gone up 25% in the past year. Now, of course, we don't have negative interest rates in Canada just yet. But could fears like something like that happening push up prices in Toronto and Vancouver even higher?
No, anything is possible. So if the group has, like if the population believes something like that, then technically that's possible. But, no, we're not going to see that. The reason why you're not going to see it is that we're already seeing the top end of housing price growth right now. And housing prices can only grow to a certain point where it is impossible for them to grow any further without some form of a correction taking place. You're seeing that really big time in Vancouver, and it's swung so rapidly in Vancouver, Jim, that I think a lot of the misunderstandings about the BC market that are taking place right now are a result in just how volatile your market is in terms of how it's swinging. So I'll explain it to you this way. You know, there's that movement out your way called "Don't Have a Million,"
right?
Where the millennials are saying, "I don't have $1 million to buy a home." Well, nobody has ever had $1 million to buy a home, and certainly no one in their early 30s has ever expected to carry a mortgage of $800,000 to $900,000. That being said, we released a report today, which can be found on rosskay.com, and it demonstrates the direct relationship between the number of first-time buyers entering and leaving the housing market and average selling prices. And what it does is it debunks virtually everything your listeners have ever heard about average selling prices how they increase. And I'm going to explain it to you this way, Jim, if you'll just bear with me and play the other side of a conversation with me here for your listeners. If there were 10 homes sold, and those 10 homes had been lived in and owned by homeowners for 10 years, and all of those 10 owners moved out and bought another home, I think it would be safe to say that 10 years, 365 days a year, those homeowners would have stayed in their homes on average 3,650 days. 10 times 365, correct?
Right.
Okay. So what happens when a first-time buyer buys in that marketplace? So the following month, the exact same type of homeowners move. People who've lived in their house for 10 years. But added to the sales mix that month is one first-time buyer. That one first-time buyer has never owned a home before. So the number of days that they've owned is 0. So you take the same number of days those 10 owners have lived, which would be 3,650 or 36,500, 10 times 10 times 365 days. But this time, instead of dividing by 10, you divide by 11 because you have 11 sales taking place. So what you would see, obviously, is a lower number of days on average that people have lived in their homes. Would you say that is correct?
Sounds like it.
Okay, so in the case I just gave you, what it does is it drops the average number of days that people have owned their home before they move by 9%. And that reading tells you there was a first-time buyer that entered into that marketplace, and that buyer commanded 9% of the inventory, 9% of those sales. So they had one sale, the other 10 homeowners had 10. So the first-time buyers, there were 9% of the sales, one, that went to first-time buyers. Days owned before trading. So this is probably one of the most important numbers that there is in real estate, in analyzing the real estate market. Because when you know that number, it explains so many things about what's happening in the housing market. And I'm going to let that number explain something right now about the Vancouver market and the $503,000 average price that Canadians were told the average price of a home that sold in Canada in February was. In Vancouver, we'll look at it this way. In 2013, the busiest housing market in Canada was called Calgary. There was universal acceptance by all housing experts, the newspapers, everyone else, that was the biggest market. In 2014, it moved. It moved to Toronto. And Toronto was recognized as the busiest market. And in 2015, and so far in 2016, I'm sure everybody will agree, Vancouver is recognized as the busiest housing market, the hottest housing market in the country. Would you agree with those comments, Jim?
Well, that's what everybody's telling us in the newspapers.
Okay. So if you were a brand new person moving into Canada in 2013, and someone asked you, what does the average house look like in Canada in 2013? You would have to show them a house that was being viewed with a higher percentage of content being from Calgary. In 2014, you'd be showing them a house that reflected Toronto a little bit more. And in 2015-16, you would be showing them a house in Vancouver that reflected Vancouver a little bit more. So the average house moves to wherever the hottest real estate market is. And this is where the confusion happens about average selling price. It's how housing bubbles develop, or housing bubbles are suggested to have developed, when in fact a lot of the blame for this goes into the calculation itself. In Vancouver, Canada's hottest housing market in February of 2016, 141 detached homes sold in the Howe Sound, West Vancouver area. Those houses had a median price of about $3.2 million. But back only 3 years earlier, February of 2013, when the BC market was functioning at 50%, like it was 50% slower than it is today, Vancouver was 114% slower than it is today. Those houses, and only 31 of those houses from Howe Sound sold. So you've gone in 3 years from 31 sales to 141 sales. You've gone from a median price in Howe Sound of $1.8 million to $3.2 million. Now, when you add those houses into an average, obviously it's going to skew the average higher. because those big, expensive homes that are selling at 326% like 326% higher rate than they were back in 2013 are now being included in the mix. Calgary, a market where the housing prices are falling, they're seeing fewer of their homes included in the mix. Now, when you calculate it out how it works, this is how just totally bizarre average selling price is. Those extra 110 homes that sold in Howe Sound in February of 2016 versus February of 2013 raised the national average selling price by $1,800 on their own. Just 110 houses that sold in Howe Sound raised the average selling price. They raised Vancouver's average selling price even more. They raised BC's average selling price. They raised the selling price of all of the homes in Howe Sound, even though right now all I'm talking about are detached homes, because there was still apartments and condominiums that were sold. And this is how the house price myth takes place. So in the report that you find today on RossK.com, where we're talking about days in the market, what people don't understand is this. When first-time buyers represent a smaller share of the home sales that are taking place, and they're removing themselves in the market, meaning their share of the sales are dropping from month to month to month, average selling price naturally inflates. It's got nothing to do with supply and demand, because clearly supply and demand does not change in 12 months. All it's got to do is where the average is being calculated from. In the first example, we showed you how first-time buyers entered the market. One buyer changed the market to 9% share from first-time buyer. In Vancouver, the massive exodus of millennials from the market means that first-time buyers have dropped and continue to drop, which means fewer and fewer lower-priced homes are being included in the sales mix. Because they're not being counted, their percentage is smaller, the average selling price naturally increases. Now, what I can tell you is this. Going back from 1991, January of 1991, to February of 2016, the average selling price virtually correlates in an inverse proportion to first-time buyers. And it goes up and down in swings as the market goes. If there was any other reason for the average sell price, this average selling price, to mirror the activity of first-time buyers, then someone could put that forward. But when there was virtually a 100% correlation between first-time buyers and average selling price, obviously, that's always the driving factor. So I'll put it to you this way, Jim. If you have 100 homes that are sold included in the average selling price 1 month, and the next month, and that 100 homes included 10 homes being sold to first-time buyers. Those first-time buyers are generally buying the lowest price homes in the neighborhood. The other 90 sales are to higher priced homes. The following month, you only have 9 first-time buyers buying low-priced homes, and you have 91 people buying more expensive homes. Would the average selling price increase? That's a question to you, Jim.
Well, I don't know. I'm not a real estate expert, but it seems that the average price, or what the asking price would be asked, would be higher.
Okay, so let's even go more extreme. Let's say that instead of having 10 first-time buyers buying lower-priced homes, we only have 5 first-time buyers buying lower-priced homes, and 95 buyers buying more expensive homes. Would that automatically skew the average upwards?
Absolutely.
Right. And that's what happens every single month across Canada. The average selling price exactly mirrors the number of first-time buyers that enter and exit the market. Now, your listeners may be wondering, oh, well, if that was true, then how come the house prices keep rising year over year over year? Well, what I'll tell you is they don't. There's a period where first-time buyers are withdrawing themselves from the market. During that period, as a percentage of sales, okay, so you've got to remember, it's always a percentage of sales. So if the percentage of sales of first-time buyers one month was 20%, the next time it was 10%, obviously the average selling price will increase. So as the percentage of first-time buyers removes itself from the market, the average selling price increases. And it increases until the people who are buying these more expensive homes wake up one morning and they say, holy cow, look at the price of homes. These prices are not going to go on forever. We're not going to buy. And at that time, their sales numbers no longer increase. And the first-time buyers, even if they stay exactly the same as the existing buyers, the existing homeowners, stop to buy, the percentage of sales going to first-time buyers automatically increases. Now, when the percent of first-time buyer sales increase, the number of existing homeowner sales then are decreasing, because we're talking about percentages. And obviously, at that time, the average selling price decreases, or it doesn't increase as rapidly as it was anyways. And that's what's called a trading cycle. And every real estate market in North America follows this exact same pattern. It has from time immemorial, as far as I'm concerned, but I have the data to prove it's happened in Canada, in all Canadian housing markets, since January the 1st, 1991 forward. First-time buyers, as a percentage of your total of sales, increase to a point, and then they begin decreasing to a point. They increase again to a point, they decrease to a point. In Vancouver, what you're seeing is a total lack of first-time buyers entering the market. So the percentage of first-time buyers is dropping. And that's why Howe Sound has watched the number of sales taking place in that community increase 326%. While the rest of BC has only increased 114%. It's because the first-time buyers are not entering the market in enough numbers to keep their percentage high. So this is how your average selling price gets skewed every time these first-time buyers move in and move out of the market. When the first-time buyers have fully moved out of the market and existing homeowners are representing the highest percentage of sales that they ever have, your average selling price increases at its most rapid rate. And once that peak is reached, which we call a trading cycle, that trading cycle is then over, because first-time buyers begin to re-enter the market. What happens is that the market never resets back down to the point of the previous trading cycle. So in other words, if the average selling price at the start of a trading cycle was $100,000, it goes all the way up to 110, but only comes back down to 105. That means the market resets at $105,000. Then the next trading cycle, it ratchets it up again. Now, a lot of people are familiar with the term the property ladder, where you buy a first-time house, you own it till you pay down the debt or it goes up in value, then you buy a larger home, then you buy a larger home, then you buy a larger home. the average Canadian will go through a minimum 4 homes in their lifetime. That's what's called moving up the property ladder. Well, the property ladder is made up of steps of trading cycles, where first-time buyers' actions allow housing prices to increase, decrease a little bit, and then start increasing again on the next step. All they're doing is they're taking steps up their property ladder, causing steps in the house price, the average selling price, to also take place. That's why you have a housing bubble and why you have a house price correction. You have to have it. Because if we look at right now today, with so few first-time buyers buying virtually anywhere in Canada, because now Toronto and Vancouver is commanding such a high share of the national sales average. Vancouver, BC, Jim. BC's percent of the Canadian average selling price has increased 114% in the last 3 years. It's increased. It's the most expensive province in the country to buy houses. Its share of the Canadian market has increased 114%. It only makes common sense that the average selling price reflects all those more higher priced homes be included in the sales mix. What happens at the national level happens at the provincial level. What happens at the provincial level happens at the municipal level. What happens at the municipal level happens at the community level. And what happens at the community level happens across the types of homes being sold: detached, townhouses, condominiums, or price categories. And that's simply how the housing market operates. So when you hear people out there, forecasters who I think you've Hilliard McBeath. I think you folks have interviewed
Hilliard
before,
Macbeth.
Jim?
Hilliard Macbeth, yeah.
Hilliard Macbeth. Okay, so he wrote a book about the pending house price collapse. Garth Turner wrote a book about the pending house price collapse. On May 2013, I wrote an article called "This is the End of the Canadian Housing Market." This is the end of the market. And people have misconstrued what I said by meaning this is the end of the market, because housing prices have risen increasingly since that day. Well, the consequence of a dying housing market are first-time buyers leaving the market. As those first-time buyers leave the market, average selling prices increase because those lower-priced homes are less and less part of the sales mix. So anybody who in Sweden or in Canada or anyone else who questions whether or not a house price correction is going to take place should first look at the charts that we have made publicly available for the first time on rossk.com. They should review our days owned between trades numbers. We are the only people, we're the only organization in the world who have ever arrived at this number. Now, the only reason we can arrive at this number is because we have the data that allows us to arrive at it, and because we have the understanding of a housing market to understand the importance of that number, and the fact that days in the market simply tell us how many first-time buyers are part of the sales mix, whether they're growing or they're decreasing. There is a 100% correlation. There is no other reason for housing prices to increase except for the fact the number of first-time buyers moving in and out of the market. Now, millennials may say, because my advice to the Don't Have a Million crowd out in Vancouver were, if you want housing prices to drop, folks, quit buying. first-time buyers should quit buying. Quit buying for 6 months. That's all that it will take. And what you're going to find is that housing prices will collapse. They will continue to fall until first-time buyers re-enter the market. Because what happens in a correction, which Vancouver's had a couple of, Canada's big one from in 1990, first-time buyers don't re-enter the market until the prices start to slide. When prices start to slide, existing homeowners cannot afford to move. They have to stay in their house and keep making their mortgage payments so that their principal gets paid off, because their house price is not going to increase as rapidly, if at all. So in other words, they're losing money every month they're in their house, and they're relying on paying down their principal to build up equity. That's when a house price correction takes place, because there's no longer enough equity for those existing homeowners to move up to a more expensive home. And the only people who can really afford to get into the market are first-time buyers. And they love it, and they increase to get in as housing prices fall. Certainly when housing prices fall in the type of homes first-time buyers normally buy, which are under $500,000. And that would be in your market. Nationally, it's under $300,000 is a first-time buyer house. So as those prices drop, more and more first-time buyers who are renting move into the market, which causes the average selling price to drop even further. The illusion of average selling price reinforces house price deflation and actually is a causal effect on a housing bubble popping. Because every single housing correction in world's history has been measured using the average selling price.
We'll have more with Ross Kay right after the break.
I'm Larry Ray, President and CEO of American Manganese Inc., listed on the TSX Venture, ticker symbol AMY, A-M-Y, with proprietary patents in the U.S., China, and South Africa. Our focus is on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. China recently legislated the responsibility for recycling onto their electric vehicle manufacturers and importers. For more information, please visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
Unbelievable harmony, spectacular performance, the ultimate tribute to the Everly Brothers and Simon & Garfunkel. Bird Dog and the Vintage Electric Band coming to Mission, White Rock, West Vancouver. Buy online and save at ontourtickets.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Ross Kay. Is there anything the government can do to stop speculation in real estate when there's so much publicity about the prices they're charging in Vancouver and places like that?
Yes. There's lots of steps a government could take if the government had the market intelligence to know what to do. What that means is this, Jim. A, every sale that is taking place to foreign buyers, as we have said on your show over and over again, in which the government itself, through FinTrack, recently interviewed 80 brokerages in BC. That government body publicly made the statement, there's serious problems. The only remedy for those serious problems will be fines and charges. And this is not like the Real Estate Council of British Columbia investigating the shadow flipping phenomenon, where, really maybe 2 or 3 people might be targeted on that. That might be the consequence of that. I don't even think that will be the consequence, but that's a worst case scenario. In completed FinTrack forms, under the suspicious reporting guidelines that appears on the government's website, which every real estate agent in Canada has been instructed to follow for more than a decade, states that if you sell a house to somebody who you do not have a 100% certainty of knowing who they are, where they come from, where their money comes from, how they got their money, you are required to fill out a completed suspicious transaction form. All the government has to do is tell the real estate agents, we want every single FINTRAC form completed by you, mailed into us. My understanding is there has been a total of 7 such forms completed in BC and mailed in. 7. Now, we do know, by looking at the real estate data in Vancouver, that there is a certain percentage of sales missing from Vancouver's sales chain. Now, what I mean by that is, if someone owns a house at 1234 Smith Street, they sell it on September the 14th with a closing date of October the 12th. And then there's a sale over on 4567 Jones Avenue, which was purchased on September the 15th and closes on the exact same October the 12th. And that home is priced approximately 50% more than the home over on Smith Street. The odds are the person from Smith is the buyer for Jones. That's just how real estate transactions work. So when you filter out the data following these patterns, you know how many sales took place where there's no supporting correlation. So we know in Vancouver in 2015, there are about 3,700 of those sales. So it's my professional opinion that Vancouver, the city of Vancouver, could have had about 3,700 sales last year to foreign buyers. So there should have been 3,700 minimum FINTRAC forms sent into the government. My understanding is there was 7. Now, those 3,700 sales, I think, were spread around. It was quite a few brokerages they were spread around. I better not comment because I don't know the exact number of what it was.
Ross, isn't it the law, though, that they have to fill out these forms, and aren't there substantial penalties for not filling out and handing in these forms?
When I sold real estate, and still today, I have 1,800 FINTRAC forms. It's more than 1,800. I'm going to use the 1,800 number to round it off. I have 1,800 FINTRAC forms stored under lock and key, which I will keep under lock and key for another 2 years. At the end of those 2 years are up, I will dispose of those forms, either via shredding or I'll burn them, one or the other. Because that's what the legislation states, Jim. The legislation is so exact. The penalties are so outrageous. I mean, it's a $250,000 fine I was facing, Jim, or I think it's up to 5 years in jail. I'm not stupid enough not to simply collect the form for every single person that I do business with, because I am never 100% sure that I'm being lied to. So I could know somebody for 20 years, and I could have sold them 2 houses. They're coming back to me for a 3rd time after these FINTRAC forms are supposed to be completed, and I have the option of completing the FINTRAC form or not. Good business practice is you do the same thing over and over again. You don't deter from your methodology. You follow the same procedures every single time.
Ross, though, but with those FINTRAC forms, did they have to be handed in, or did you just have to fill them out?
I had to fill them out. I had to see proper ID. If I wasn't comfortable with the ID that was provided, then I had to notify the government. Now, in my case, Jim, because I didn't deal with any suspicious transactions, my business was virtually all referral or past client. I saw official government ID for all of those people, and it was never a problem for me. But I'll tell you this. I saw ID from all of those people, both the husband and the wife. I completed a form for both the husband and the wife. So I was assured up to the standard of the legislation that these people were who they said they were.
But Ross, my question is, did you have to send those forms in? Did the government receive them, or did you just have to have them filled out?
I had to have them filled up and kept. I was supposed to submit the ones where I felt were suspicious. Now, they gave me a whole list of procedures to go through in determining what's suspicious or not.
But Ross, what I'm seeing right here is the flaw in the system. Is have the form filled out and it must be sent in. Not shall, on your opinion, should it be sent in, but it should be sent in. It shall be sent in, not may be sent in.
And with real estate, there's no need for that, Jim. And really, now you've got to get in, there's privacy reasons and everything else. I mean, we have Papedia to deal with too here. And everybody's forgetting about Papedia, the privacy legislation. So there are reasons why you can't submit the form. Now, the realtors have no fear of false prosecution. So any realtor who says, oh, I didn't want to send it in because I was afraid that people were going to sue me for making a false claim, the legislation wipes that out. Should the forms all be sent in? No. What should happen is FINTRAC should have a team of 2 or 3 people in each province who drops into the local real estate office and says, let me see your FINTRAC forms. Because my FINTRAC forms had to be kept at the brokerage until I left, and then I took those forms with me. Okay? That's where those forms are stored. The broker, not only the agent who did the deal, but also the owner of the brokerage that agent is working at, is also responsible for those FINTRAC forms. So all FINTRAC had to do in Vancouver, or all the provincial government had to request, was that FINTRAC sends out a couple investigators to investigate a few of these offices who are bragging in the newspaper about selling homes to foreign buyers. They can do a Google search, review those newspaper ads where everybody was bragging about all these foreign buyer sales, and call those agents up directly and say, we want to see your FINTRAC forms. The very first agent, as FINTRAC has already found, who does not supply a FINTRAC form, should be charged. Within a matter of 48 hours, every single real estate agent and brokerage in BC will be in a panic because they know they're next. And what real estate agents, by nature, it's a fear-driven business. So the entire real estate industry is controlled through fear. The Canadian Real Estate Association has used fear for 40 years to control their membership. They used the fear of the Competition Bureau. They used the fear of FINTRAC. They used the fear of MLS data being released to the public. They used the fear of loss of the realtor brand. All they use is fear and fear and fear in the industry. The brokers love it. The guys who own the brokerages love this fear because this fear keeps the agents working for them. So it is a self-fulfilling prophecy here. FINTRAC has already said they've investigated 80 brokerages. They have already said they saw anomalies, serious anomalies. FINTRAC knows they're going to charge people. The very first time it's charged, Jim, all these problems are gone. It is gone. I promise you, Jim, it will be gone overnight because the real estate boards will be running courses. The brokerages won't want to be sued, so they're going to make sure all of their agents are trained. If the brokerages weren't collecting the forms themselves, they're going to change their office policy so they collect the forms. And any suspicious transaction that hasn't been reported will be reported. With hands clasped, down on their knees, please don't charge us because we didn't send this form in properly. I don't know what the penalty is for late reporting. I don't know what that case is. You've heard a lot of talk out there about, well, why aren't the lawyers? The lawyers are involved and the lawyers are willing participants in this deal. Well, lawyers are legally bound not to complete FINTRAC forms. Lawyers went to court, the federal court, to win the right to not have to complete FINTRAC forms in their clients under the lawyer-client privilege. They won that right. So lawyers do not have to submit FINTRAC forms, even if they're dealing with a terrorist. Now, the banks, on the other hand, are not so lucky. So any bank out there who has loaned money on a house purchase or accepted funds and filtered those funds through their branch to complete a real estate transaction where the buyer was a foreign buyer, that bank is now in trouble. My only comment to that will be is, fine, go ahead. The banks appear to be able to do whatever the heck they want in this country without repercussion. So I don't think you're going to see these big multi-billion-dollar quarterly profit earning banks paying the price here. Who's going to pay the price is the real estate agents and their brokers. But I'm sorry, Jim, I have no sympathy. The industry received lots of education, lots of opportunity, has had more than a decade to set down their own practices on this issue. If those FINTRAC forms aren't completed, that's their problem. So FINTRAC forms were the first thing you need to get things under control.
So what could the BC government do to put a handle on this real estate speculation?
Well, the provincial level, Jim, all they need to do is they need to put a speculative land transfer tax in. And what I mean by that is this. If you purchase a home, you don't move into it, and you sell it for a gain, you pay an extra land transfer tax. There is no restrictions on provincial governments in terms of taxing land transfer tax. They can establish any terms they want. As you know, in BC, some people don't even have to pay land transfer tax. So it's already a staggered system. All Ms. Clark has to do is stagger the system a little bit more to eliminate these foreign purchases. The problem is Ms. Clark is already on the record saying, for some reason, she thinks that housing prices dropping will do more damage than housing prices staying where they are or going higher. She's wrong. The only people who win from housing prices are people who are 80 years old or people who are leaving your province. Everybody else pays the price. They pay the price for 40 to 50 years.
Ross, thanks a lot for chatting with us.
Thanks, Jim.
My guest has been Ross Kay from Ross Kay Realty Consultants. His website's rosskay.com and his consumer site, rosskay.ca. You're listening to HowStreet.com Radio. Our popular YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. Find us on Twitter at Talk Digital Net. Comments or questions for the show can be sent to info@HowStreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard. Thanks for listening.
Comments made on HowStreet.com Radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HowStreet.com Radio is a production of HowStreet Media Incorporated.